This is a nice session to discuss passing reference data type arguments. But I want to start by reminding us where we started this discussion. Earlier, in an earlier session, we talked about passing primitive data type arguments. There is a video by the name Passing Information to a Method or a Constructor in the playlist that covered this. So I'll make a point of attaching the card anyway on screen at this point. So you should see that card at the top right. So passing primitive data type arguments, we saw how when you're passing an argument, it takes the value and it will use that value. And we saw how that the scope, we saw the differences in scope for the same value. I had promised that later we'll be talking about passing reference data type arguments, and we've reached that juncture because it now flows with the concept that we just discussed in the previous session before this one. So passing reference data type arguments, what happens is we have, for example, circle my circle. Let me go to the code and then we'll come back here. So let me walk you through the code. I'll be sharing the code, of course. Let me walk you through the code and then we'll come back. I'll go back and review that whiteboard. So from the top, in the class argument, we have a main method. So let's just flow with the main method. In an earlier session, we covered this part where passing arguments is by value for primitive data types. I added an example for reference data types. If it's a string, it's a simple one, it still works the same way as the value. So let's walk through that. So there's a string passed in main, the value is the argument. Then we are calling this object test int, which is an object for our argument constructor. Then through it, we are invoking reference data type, which is a method inside our class argument. So this method expects us to pass in an argument of type string, and in that we are passing the argument. So if I come here and print print pass in, I expect to see the argument for a start. Then within the method, we are locally resetting the value of passing to passed in method. So if I print this, I'll see passed in method. Then I'll go back to the main method, and the next step is step 13, where I print in passed in main, and in that I'll still see the argument because the local reset in the method did not persist. So let me just run this. I'll comment this out first so we can focus on the string example and the one from an earlier session. What I see is the argument, passed in method, then the argument. So the change in the local method did not persist. Now, sometimes when you're working with the reference, object references, or rather reference data types, you would expect, or rather you would see that the value changes or it persists. So let's walk through that. I have a class here, class circle. Class circle has one constructor, custom constructor, that is expecting arguments, two int arguments, origin 1 and origin 2. And what you're saying inside that constructor is we are setting our origin, our field, origin 1 to the argument that was passed in when the object is created. So we have this private field, origin 1, and private field, origin 2, and in our constructor, we are setting those arguments to the value that will be passed in when we are invoking, or rather when we are creating an object. So the class also has a method, the setters and the getters. So this is a method to get the origin. This is a method to set the origin. We also covered that in a previous session. I can't really remember what the title is for that session, but if I do, I'll attach the card. If not, I'll just go back a few videos and you'll see it's still part of the playlist. Which is why if you're just joining us, perhaps it would make more sense if you start from the top. If you find that it's a topic you already know about, you can just follow along. If not, you'll need to go back a few videos. Okay, so here we go. What is going on in the circle? There's another method, move circle. there is a method move circle, and this method expects us to pass in an object of this class circle of the blueprint circle. Rather, the variable declaration here is circle, and then two arguments, two integers. So going back to the main method where we are doing that, we are creating from the constructor in circle, from the custom constructor in circle, we are creating a new object and we are passing in 10 and 10 by their variable names. If I was to print this here, I should see 10 and 10. And next, through that object that we've just created, we are invoking move circle. And in move circle, which expects us to pass an object, we are passing my circle. Now my circle here is 10, 10 currently as the origin 1 main and origin 2 main. And origin 1 is 5, origin 2 is 5. So because we've invoked the method, let's go to the method move circle. Here we go. So if I was to print this origin 1 and origin 2, I'll see that move circle passed in arguments is 5, 5. Next, circle set origin. So what happens here is I'm going back to the actual object that my circle is referencing. And before I continue on to explain this bit, let's go to the whiteboard so we can understand diagrammatically what's going on. So here we are. What happened is in the main method, we created an object by the name myCircle. We initialized it as such with the values 10, 10. And then in the method moveCircle, we passed in that value, the value new circle 10, 10, the copy of that value. Yeah, same as how we did it in the primitive data types. So we're taking the value, the copy of that value, and we are setting it to circle, circle. So circle equals new circle 10, 10. Inside the method, we are updating the object. So both circle and myCircle is now pointing to the same object, like this. So we started with myCircle being a 10, 10, and then in the method, we want to update. The circle reference is pointing to this object, myCircle reference is pointing to this object. In the method, we want to update that object. And how do we do that? We do it like this. So we are calling circle, and we are calling set origin 1, which is this method inside the blueprint. So that in that case, it's pointing to the same object. Then inside it, when we want to set the origin circle, we are fetching the value by using get origin 1 of that was passed in the argument, and then we are adding to that value the argument 5 that was passed in the method moveCircle. And we do the same thing for the other one. So circle, set origin, then set origin expects us to pass an int value, and in that int value, we are fetching the value of get origin 2, which in this case is 10, as we passed in earlier in our argument. Then we are adding 5 to it. So earlier on, I had briefly discussed encapsulation. These are the getter and setters help us with encapsulation. If you missed that session, I will try my best to find it so I can attach the card. If not, it should be a few videos from now, from this before this one, same in the same playlist. So we have origin 2. Getters and setters methods that helps us with encapsulation, where we set our fields as private fields, so they don't have so other classes don't have direct access to them. They can only access them via getters and setters, and in the getters and setters we get to dictate the access. So this getter is returning the value, and then this setter is resetting the value, the one that using the one that was passed in the argument. So this is what we are doing here and here. Okay, As part of the exercise, I'll just state that you can maybe go through the code. I'll attach the code, of course, as I have always been doing in the GitHub, from GitHub. So just go through the code and try and understand some more based on how I'm explaining. So if I was to print this here, then I'll see 1515. Now, funny thing is, if I was to reset this locally to 00 and I print it, I should see 00. However, if I go back to the main method and print after having persisted the value 15, I'll see 15. So let me just run that. And then I'll have to go back to the whiteboard to explain what has just happened again. So passed in arguments is 10, 10. Then the one that was passed in for the move circle is 5, 5. Updated one is 15, 15. Then the reassigned one locally is 0, 0. But then if I was to print the persisted change, I'll see 15, 15. So how it happens in the background, once again, this is what happens. A copy of the passing values occurs the same way as it does in variable in primitive data types. For reference data types, the copy of that value, new circle 1010, is taken in, and that is the value that will be assigned to circle here. And so this is the copy, new circle 1010. And in that case, inside the method, when you are pointing to the same object, when the reference is pointing to the same object, you can then update the object to 1515. And if you update locally without referencing the current object, then it will be destroyed beyond the scope of the method. So the persisting value then would be 1515. Let's look at another representation of that. My circle is pointing to circle object value 1010. Then circle reference, which is pointing to the same object, is updating it to 1515. So if you were to print my circle, you'll see 1515 after the update. Then the one that was done locally is 00. That one will be destroyed when the method returns. If you're finding it confusing, please take a look at the code that I'll be sharing in the link. It will make much more sense with time. See you on the next one.